The human experience, with our flaws, our passions, our triggers, our inspirations, and our imprints. If we could see behind everyone's story, then perhaps what we would have is deep compassion. In this podcast, I get the chance to explore these stories from some truly fascinating people in some honest and heartwarming conversations. And best of all, I get to share these discussions with you. I'm Lael Stone, and this is Humans Being. Welcome to Humans Being. I'm Lael Stone. And my humanness for this week is, two parts. The first part is about new beginnings. And I've been thinking a lot at this week of my life around the new things that are opening up for me. I'm in this stage where children are about to leave home. I'm really starting to think about what do I want to do for this next part of my life, and leaning into some of the stories we have around beginnings. Now, I do back myself as someone that often jumps in. I'm not afraid to just be like, hey, there's an idea, I'm going to do it. I've done that most of my life. I just kind of jump in with blind courage. So the beginnings part don't feel too hard for me because I'm often like, hey, what have I got to lose? Let's give this a go. But what comes with beginnings is also endings, and sometimes I find that, navigating those endings and ending things well can be really tricky. And I guess for me, endings, and as I get older, wanting to end things well has been really important. I think when I was younger, when things felt over, whether it was a friendship, whether it was a work thing, I'd just be like, I'll just turn away, I'm just moving on to something else. But I realise now how important ending well is, and actually how it is often very tricky for people to end well. And because endings can bring up grief, because there can be a big thing that comes with finishing something, I've noticed that sometimes in order to not feel that, people just blow things up so they don't have to feel the feelings that go with those endings. And I've become really conscious about moving forward in life and making sure I really acknowledge what has come from the past and to end things well. And so that's what I'm sitting with at the moment. As I'm moving into some new things, I'm also having to say goodbye to some old things. And I'm just very conscious about treading with a level of awareness as I do that. So I wonder how you are going with beginnings and endings in your life right now. I wonder if you reflect on the endings in your life. Have you just kind of run away or blown them up because it's felt hard? Or have you been able to turn and really sit with the different things that come up for you when we're finishing something? So, talking about endings and new beginnings, my guest today is one I'm very excited to talk about, who I think knows a lot about endings. And my guest today is Dr. Hannah Gould. Thanks for being here, Hannah.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start with just reading a little bit of a bio about you, and then we're going to jump in. So Dr. Hannah Gould is a cultural anthropologist at the University of Melbourne who studies death, Buddhism, and material culture across contemporary Australia and East Asia. She completed her PhD at Melbourne and holds a postdoctoral fellowship focused on death care. She's also a lecturer in Buddhist studies at the university and a fellow of the Death Tech Research Team. That's like a serious, the Death Tech Research Team. That's
not that scary, I promise.
A multidisciplinary research group examining the intersections of death, technology, and society. Her academic monograph, When Death Falls Apart, traces the life cycle of traditional Japanese Buddhist memorial altars. This is so fascinating. From production to household use to disposal as a way of understanding how death rituals change over time. Her 2026 popular book, How to Die in the 21st Century, can't wait to talk about that, brings her decade of research to a general readership, covering everything from cremation and green burials to grief etiquette and emerging body disposal technologies. Wow, there's a lot of big words in this one. Okay, so before we begin, Hannah, I would love to know, as I'm talking about beginnings and endings there, I always love to just invite my guests to reflect on, where do beginnings and endings, how's that sat in your life? Have you learned to end things well, or are you hesitant about beginnings? Where do you sit with that?
I feel like a lot of my life has been about endings, right? And how to approach endings with grace, and to learn to live through change. And I'm not sure it's something I've always particularly done well. And often for me, I think it's something that's been forced upon me. in ways that perhaps are earlier than my peers. So, my dad died when I was really young, in my 20s, and that's an ending that you never really ask for or accept or think about, the death of your parents. And for me, endings have taken a lot of time and effort and emotional kind of care to be with and to survive. Beginnings, like you, I'm not so worried about. I love a new beginning. Sign me up to something, anything. And in fact, I think maintenance is actually a lot harder sometimes. Like, I feel like there should be an award for the best kept a project going. We're always handing out like awards for the best new thing that someone's generated, and I'm like, gosh, it'd be great if there was an award for like, no, you just kept at it.
Yeah, you've done this for 10 years. Well done. Yeah.
You're still doing it. You haven't changed. It's still alive. Like, you've kept the pot plant alive. Everyone can go and buy a new pot plant, but like keeping it alive. So I love a new beginning, and I've always found those so exciting, and, the allure of the new. And it's really the endings, I think, that have challenged me, but also where you get the most growth.
Yeah. And do you think too, and I mean, just from your research or just what, the field that you're working in, do you think the fact that we haven't been modelled healthy endings has a big part to play in how most of us just don't know how to do it well?
Yeah, completely. I think, it's people always ask me, why I'm afraid of death. Why am I afraid of death? Of course you are, right? Like, you've never seen death. You've never had to experience it. In many ways, contemporary society is set up such that you never have to encounter a dead body. You never have to encounter a dying person. And a lot of that is great, right? A lot of that is because we live longer. We're healthier. We're so blessed to have health care systems that keep us alive, well into our 80s, most of us. But it also means that we're not going through what my grandparents went through, which was experiencing grief at a really young age.
Yeah.
Both sets of my grandparents, they had 11 siblings.
Wow.
Yeah. Very reproductive family back then. Both sets of my grandparents had 11 siblings, and I think only 2 or 3 of them made it through to adulthood.
Wow.
So childhood mortality was such that in 1990 in Australia, something like 30% of people died before the age of 5.
Wow.
Right. So we had this extraordinary childhood mortality that's almost evaporated, right? Like, we just got living longer and longer. That's a great thing. It also means that we're not very good at death anymore.
Yes.
Because usually your first major bereavement is probably maybe your parents.
Yes.
Right? Maybe this
an
animal, if you have an animal. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but I think people should get pets so that their kids experience death. Get a goldfish, start small. But we're not very good at death because we don't practice.
Yes.
And you can't get good at something you don't practice.
And it reminds me a lot, we just were talking before we started recording about how birth and death are very, very similar. And I was showing that I worked in birth for 15 years and I got to attend a lot of births, and I also had some deaths at births, which were just some of the most sacred moments of my life that I'll never forget. But I feel a bit the same way around birth, that we don't birth in villages anymore. We don't see our aunties give birth and our sisters and our cousins. For a lot of people, their first experience of birth is when they're going to labour themselves, or what television feeds us around what birth is. So there's a lot of fear. There's this whole preconceived idea, drama, someone's going to die, baby's going to die, needs doctors to save us. Like, and when I used to teach childbirth education, I used to be like, we don't see normal birth. And it's changed a lot, actually, I think, since Instagram's come along and since social media. We see normalized birth now, and I think we've had a better idea about it. But I really do agree with you that the same applies for death, right? Because we're not really exposed to it and we don't see it, and it's something that has got a whole lot of fear around it.
Yeah, I mean, reflecting, like, when is the last time you saw somebody die from natural causes on TV? Like, hardly ever. We did see death all the time, like, true crime podcasts going into gory details and CSI and Bones and murder mysteries and Call of Duty and vampires and, like, there's death everywhere, but it's always kind of extraordinary death.
Yes.
Right? It's always supernatural or violent. And so our consumption of it is always kind of voyeuristic, right? It's like, the most exciting, sexy kinds of death. And it's never like, this is an 85-year-old who's just slowly declining, right? It's never just like how we're actually probably going to die. And what that does is produce fear. Like, and so in the same way that, I think a lot of birth education is just to normalize birthing, a lot of death education is just to normalize dying.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, it's quite normal that you probably will stop eating.
Yeah.
It's quite normal that you'll make these breath sounds. That's not painful. That's not scary. That's just, the fluid in your lungs. It's quite normal that, your person might rally before the end and all of a sudden remember their name and want to talk to you. And that usually is a sign that they're dying. Like, so all of these kind of mysterious things are actually just really normal facts of dying. And I think we used to have that knowledge because we used to see dying people more. We don't do that as much because we hide aging and dying people away.
Yeah.
Right. There's a statistic that well over 70% of Australians die in institutions. But very few people actually want to do that, right? Most people want to die at home.
Yeah.
But we just usually die away from our families. And I think that's quite a sadness, not just for the dying person, but also for everyone who doesn't get to experience death.
100%. Okay. There's like 5 directions I want to go. Hang on. Before we go there, I feel like I need to ask firstly, what brought you to this work? Let me just start with that, but then I want to go down the other path. What brought you to doing this work?
I never kind of set out to be a deaf person. Although on reflection, thinking about it now, I did have a lot of, friends die in high school. Like, I had 2 or 3 of my good friends die when I was in high school of leukemia, of childhood cancer. But I was an anthropologist and I was studying religion, really interested in the diversity, the beauty, the complexity of human religions and human cultures around the world. And then 22, 23 years old, and kind of overnight, my dad got cancer, had a major heart attack when he was having surgery for that cancer, went into a coma, was in the ICU, thought that he would never wake up, woke up in front of my eyes as I was speaking to him in the ICU, came back, rallied a year, treatment, and died within the course of a year when I was 22, 23 years old. And as I write in the book, I thought I was perfectly mature. I was like, well, I'm the oldest, you're like, well, I'm the oldest I've ever been. This is fine. I can deal with losing, I think, not just my dad, but my person. Like, my dad was, probably is to this day, like the person in the family that I most connected with and understood me. We're very similar brains. And, upon reflection, I was shockingly young to lose a parent. And I think talking about learning to grieve and, getting good at death and normalizing death, one of the things you learn going through that is that, closure is bullshit. And it's 12, 13 years later, and your grief doesn't disappear, it just changes. It just gets older as you get older. And so I think, some people, when they have these big experiences, travel halfway around the world, they go climb a mountain, they go through a lot of therapy, whatever it is. I think how my brain works, one way my brain works is I said, cool, I'll do a PhD on that. I recommend the therapy also. I think both therapy and a PhD are a great idea. Yeah. But I think there is a real desire to understand. I had a real desire to understand something intellectually.
Yeah.
And how the system works. Like, if you'll indulge me, I had this moment where I don't know if you've ever organized a funeral.
No, but I've been part of organizing of one. Yeah.
So often the funeral attendant will come to your home and they'll sit out and they'll say, what would you like? And they pulled out this back in the day, it was like a printed catalogue of all of the different coffins, right? And it was like, you can have the mahogany, or here's the oak, or here's the the further you go, the cheaper they get. Like, they hide the cheap ones towards the end. But also I remember all of these coffins had these terrible naff names. Like, they were paint colors. It was midnight dance, or romantic blue. And I was like,
whoa.
But it was just this moment of complete disconnect where I was like, this has nothing to do with my dad or who he was. And then I was just like, who designed this? Who built this system of death and dying and funerals that I'd been thrust into? And it was, I suppose, the kind of anger or frustration at that system that made me go, okay, I want to work out how it works.
Yeah.
Partially because I wanted to change it, but also because I just couldn't understand how that's how we had collectively decided to do death.
Yes.
And it just seemed like a very odd way of deciding to do death.
And it just strikes me like many of our systems that have been around, whether it's our medical systems, our education systems, they've been away for a really, really long time. And we just kind of accept it. That's what it is. Until we reach a point in time where we go, hang on, does that feel good?
Yeah.
I mean, and this makes so much sense, what you're saying, because I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't want that if I was dying. I don't think I would want the mahogany blue or the thing. I don't want that. I want a celebration. I want something different.
Yeah.
And you're right. It really is. We just kind of accept it because that's how it's always been, hasn't it?
I mean, and most people, if they are very lucky and very privileged in Australia, most people in their lives will organise 1 or 2 funerals, right? The vast majority of people will only ever organise their parents' funerals. So it's not something we do very frequently. And as much as I kind of hate saying that my dad's death was an opportunity, a gift, I got to encounter that system when I was in my 20s. And so I've had a lot more time to think about that system and to, I suppose, ask those questions.
Yes.
Than other people do, because people mostly do it when their parents are 90, right? Yeah. And they've had a career.
Yeah. And you're in the moment too, in this grief and all the things, and you just kind of go with what is. And I agree with you. I don't think we think about death at all. We don't think about what would be a good death for us.
Yeah.
What would be a sacred death for us? And that can sound very morbid and we don't want to think about it, but it's something, especially as we get older, that is worth thinking about, to be like, what would feel really beautiful for me? Okay, I've got just so many things that I want to ask you about.
This is rather big.
It is big. I feel like I should rein it back a bit because I get really excited about this topic. So I'm like, not everyone feels this way, Lael. But I find it really fascinating because it really, with death, we have life, and death helps us to live well in the sense of that, it's going to happen. And so what are we waiting for? And, it's inevitable at some point. Let's talk about firstly just people's fear around death. I'm wondering too, because of the work you do you find that people, when they find out what you do, want to tell you their death stories?
Yeah.
It's just as you were saying that, I'm like, oh God. When I used to work as a doula, people just were like, oh my God, I had 26-hour labor and then this happened and that happened. I'll be like, okay.
Sometimes you're in the back of an Uber and you go, oh, do I really want to say what I do?
They want to tell you a story because there is such a need to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
There is such a need to debrief. I used to see this in birth all the time. Women did not have the opportunity to debrief it. Yeah. And I imagine death is very much the same.
Well, that's the kind of, I suppose, the odd thing. You kind of say everyone's afraid of death. Yes, death is taboo. No one wants to talk about it. Yes. But if you give people the opportunity, if you just give them a little bit of space, a little bit of a welcome to say, you can ask me anything. You can ask me any question. All of a sudden, it's like the floodgates open.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time it is things like the vast majority of questions that I get are, this experience happened to me. Mm-hmm. This is what happened to my grandmother, to my mother, my brother. Is this normal?
Yes.
Right? Like, was that what was supposed to happen? Or what actually happened there?
Yeah.
And you see that in kind of the medical setting where, as you said, with birth, often there isn't an opportunity to kind of debrief or to check in. And there's been a lot of work done with our doctors to kind of give people the opportunity, families, to call the doctor, to call the nursing team and say, hey, can you talk me through my dad's death again? Can you talk me through the last 24 hours or the last 48 hours? And I think much more time needs to be invested into that kind of aftercare of kind of getting straight with people about what happened and allowing them to ask opportunities. Also because we know that grief does very funny things to people's memory, right? Like grief stops you forming new memories. And so it makes sense that you still have questions.
Yes.
Because you can't retain information. So it's often, is this normal? And can you clarify what happened? Because no one's explained it to me because they don't have the knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you were mentioning before about a fascination that people have, whether it's like true crime, it's like Call of Duty, it's like there's these themes around death that I find people dance around.
Yeah.
Yet there's a real fear of talking actually about death. And do you see that people do that because they are trying to make sense on some level around where death sits in their life? Like, what do you see as that correlation?
It's not scary if it happens to only if it happens to other people, right? And all of those kind of voyeuristic, true crime, Call of Duty, violent zombies, they're not the death that'll happen to me and my loved ones. That's over there. That's someone else's death. There's a great anthropologist writing in the 1950s, and he had this theory that what we were experiencing is the pornography of death, right? Which is that we do talk about death, but only like in the private arena.
Yes.
And so in the same way that like sex is taboo and no one wants to talk about sex in public, but you have this kind of private thing that you can do over here, which is pornography. He said the same thing's going on with death, right? And obviously what we've seen in recent years is kind of more sex positivity and education and people talking about it. And it has been normalized. It is a biological process. There is more kind of support. Hopefully what we're also seeing is the same thing with death, right? It's no longer just this kind of somewhat shameful, somewhat voyeuristic thing that you consume, right? These kind of, extreme examples. It's more normalized and there's more education about it. But I think we've got a long way to go with death. We have, for example, sex ed in primary schools and high schools. We don't have death education. And I see no reason not to. As much as, most of the time we talk about children and death, it's the adults who are freaked out by that. The kids are fine.
Yeah.
The kids have questions and the kids can deal with the reality of it. Most of the time when I'm talking about death, it's the parents that are worried.
Yeah.
And that's understandable. But, I do think there's much more of a role that we can do to help people normalize dying.
Yes, absolutely. And when you encounter people that do have those really big fears about death, what do you think is really going on underneath that?
So I think, many people would say that everyone fears death, right? Like every society, every culture. I mean, some people would say that this is the kind of the central fear of humanity that motivates everything we do, right? We all walk around just trying to not think about the fact we're going to die. And so we get into relationships and buy houses and build careers and shop, buy yourself little treats so you don't have to think about your dog dying and whatever it is. And I think that is to a certain extent true. And I don't think that's necessarily also harmful, right? Like you can't go around every single moment thinking you're going to die. You can't contemplate it the whole time. All of these kind of coping mechanisms we have to deal with our mortality can be perfectly fine. But there is a small percentage of people who suffer from something called death anxiety. And death anxiety is increasingly being recognized as a kind of psychological condition recognized within the DSM, which is people who really struggle with thoughts of death and dying, struggle with contemplating it for themselves, for others, and has quite a negative pathological impact on their day-to-day. So, it stops them from consuming certain TV or books when they know somebody's going to die. They really get concerned about things. Often it manifests as health anxiety, right? So getting really concerned about signs and symptoms, or it can manifest as OCD. And so for those people who do encounter it, and they come occasionally in my classes, right? Then you have to kind of suggest that they go and get some clinical help because it is very treatable. It is a manageable condition, but there are some people who are far more concerned with death than others. And as with most anxiety conditions, though, there's a way to support those people through those fears.
Yeah, beautiful. So when we kind of look at, as you were talking before about when your dad died and, these coffins and this is the way we've always done it and the system, I've heard you talk about that there are many different ways that we can acknowledge death and either funerals or things that we do with bodies.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to some of the things? Because when I was listening to you, I was like, whoa, I didn't even know that existed. We know about kind of cremation and burial, but, there's other things that are happening in the world. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
I think one of the nicest things about coming from the background of an anthropologist is that anthropologists are interested in humanity writ large, not just what we do in our society, but how everyone around the world practices being human, right? This thing called life and death. And that is always, in some ways, it always makes you question what you do in your society because you know that it's other worlds are possible. So, you know, when my dad died, the choice that was open to us was burial or cremation. But burial and cremation are not the only ways that people handle bodies, right? And that's, you know, multiple different ways of things like, for example, natural burial. So a very big movement in the UK, in the US, in Europe, not to have coffins, right? Not to dig really deep graves, put marble headstones, or not even to have a permanent grave, but to lay somebody to rest, perhaps in a shroud, perhaps in a wicker casket, perhaps, you know, in a meadow, and use that burial as actually a form of regenerative conservation for a woodland, for example. Or you see these kind of new ways of being with the dead emerging in the US around things like composting or like, you know, recycling the body, water-based cremation, things that have a smaller environmental footprint. And, you know, on the one hand, there's this kind of calculation, I suppose, about carbon and, you know, what's the lightest footprint and trying to be greener in death. But I think it's part of a broader movement, which is also about, well, how do we have a different death care system, right? In Korea, to give one example, funerals are mostly held in hospitals.
Really?
Yeah. So you'll go to a hospital and they'll treat you. But if you do happen to die, they'll keep the body there at the hospital as a morgue. And then the funeral ceremony will be held like in the first floor of the hospital.
Wow.
And so the hospital becomes a place that you're both born and die.
Wow.
Right? And there's a more of a circular idea of life. Whereas in Australia, if you were to ever suggest that death was even mentioned in a hospital, that would be kind of offensive, right? Because it's like, well, what do you mean I'm going to die if I go to this hospital, right? Or, you know, in America, there's a lot more in-home death, a lot more in-home hospice care, a lot more people die at home because they're given the support to do so. I just think there's so many different ways that we could be doing death. No one country or society has the best option, but it's what we were talking about. Because no one thinks about it, it's like we've kind of written ourselves out of the possibility of making it better.
Yeah.
You can't make death better if you never want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And what that means is that we just keep doing it in a way that's not bad, but just not as good as it could be.
Yes.
I'm kind of skeptical about ever making death good.
Yeah, no, it's a weird thing to put that together. But I guess, like for me, the words that come up where we think about, for me, I just think personally of what I would love is to have a sacred death. Like that's the word that comes for me, which is the honoring of whatever my body's doing towards the end, the honoring of just this is a healthy ending. This is a good ending. You know, this is a celebration. My time is done. I am free. That's it.
And your body knows what to do.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is a phrase that might be often used in
birth a lot
as well,
yep.
right?
Yep.
People get really, you know, I suppose I'm always kind of a little bit skeptical about optimization. And this must be, it must be the same thing with birth when people talk about their like perfect birth plan.
Yeah.
Like this is going to be the good birth. I have all of these things. And, you know, nothing, plans never survive contact with reality. And the same thing about death. Like people have, you know, a good death and they have all these ideals, but then that adds a lot of pressure as well. And it rarely goes to plan, right? Rarely can you have exactly the death that you want. In the same way that rarely can you have exactly the birth plan that you want. But just because you can't have the ideal doesn't mean that you shouldn't try and do as much as possible to make it better. And I think, you know, it is that kind of knowledge of like your body knows how to die.
Yeah.
You can't fail this.
Yes.
You know, it knows what's going on. You're just there for the ride.
Yeah.
And if you have that kind of confidence and you're taught that and you're supported through that, then I think dying can be sacred, right? If we give it that space.
Yes. There's a beautiful death doula I know who does a lot of training, and she says dying is just not breathing in again. She says it's just one breath. That's it.
An exhale that is not followed by an inhale.
Yeah. And I just, remember hearing her say that, going, oh, there's a simplicity of that. And yet there can often be a lot of turmoil leading up to that point, and pain for some people, and
scare. People find it scary. It doesn't have to be scary.
Yes.
I think it's actually very sad in many cases, because that fear often also leads people to distance themselves from the dying person and from their family. Like, so many people come to me and they say, oh, my best friend's dad's just died, or somebody's just died. What do I say to them? I don't know how to reach out to them. Like, I'm like, well, nothing you can say can really make it worse. Like, the worst thing that's ever happened to them has already happened.
Yeah.
And maybe you won't get it right. That's okay. Like, don't be afraid to be with dying people, or don't be afraid to be with grieving people just because you don't know what to say. You're not certain about the right words.
Yeah.
And that's what concerns me, is that almost like, as you said, it's that fear, that lack of knowledge that leads to this kind of complete disengagement with death.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that leaning in, if you feel courageous enough to do it, I have such a beautiful memory of my grandmother, so my maternal grandmother, who died maybe 5-6 years ago. And we knew she was about to die, and I got there maybe about half an hour after she died, and my auntie was there. And I immediately was like, let's honor her body. Like, and my cousin was there as well. And I was like, we all came from her.
Yeah. Like, how cool is that?
No. And so we put on this music that was from like the 1920s, and we had a candle lit, and we washed her body, and then we massaged it. And I remember massaging her hands, and I wasn't that close to my grandma, but I was so struck with, it is because of you that I get to be here, and it's so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And we massaged, and we thanked her body, and we thanked her for, being the hard ass that she was. She was.
Yeah.
And we laughed and we cried and we just honored her. God, it was powerful. And I just remember thinking, this is just something really simple, but just so beautiful as an ending, as a really honoring ending for her life, and for what her life had also given us. And those simple things don't have to be big, do they? They can be really simple and beautiful.
They don't have to cost money. They don't have to be professionally organized. You don't have to pay somebody. You don't have to have words. You don't have to have religion. You can just, make a cup of tea, right? Or, put on some music and everyone dance. You can find ways to honor people, just think about who they were when they were alive.
Yeah.
And then that's what you should do in death.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not, I think the other thing that people don't kind of sometimes clock all the time is that, like, death is not an emergency.
Yes.
When I talk to my students, and so I now teach death at the university, and I talk to them about, like, what would you do if you walked into your grandmother's home and, your 90-year-old grandmother was dead, found her dead. And a lot of them are like, oh, I've got to call the police, got to call the ambulance. And I said, well, why don't you just make a cup of tea? Why don't you just sit down and kind of be with her body? Like, she's 95, she's dead. You can give yourself time and grace to sit with your feelings. Like, death is so ordinary in some ways that I think because we encounter it so rarely, it always seems so big and scary.
Yes.
And extraordinary. But it's just, what's that there's a brilliant Emily Dickinson's poem that's like, as I lay dying, a fly buzzed by. It's just, it's every day.
Yeah, it is. We were chatting just before about doing funerals differently, and the last hurrah, and I said, do you know them? And you're like, yes. And I came across them on Instagram because I just saw one of their reels about a funeral they were doing for someone, and I was like, what is this gorgeousness? Because, as you said, what's their catch line that they use?
Oh, it's like extraordinary funerals for unique people or something, or like, original people. Or yeah.
And I highly recommend following them on Instagram.
Great Instagram follow, which you wouldn't think for a funeral home, but it's very uplifting.
So good, because you just see them, the funerals they they have for these people are so unique, and they're so different, and sometimes there's costumes and sometimes it's like
medieval reenactment funeral
playing, and just like it's beautiful.
Yeah,
and
they had a coffin at the Tote live music venue in Melbourne, and they had a heavy metal band. And then they like barbarians, so they're like performing like half naked in kilts and stuff, and then a mosh pit around the coffin.
Oh God.
Which is now maybe that sounds wonderful to you, and maybe that sounds like the worst thing ever. But like the kind of the point is, it's whatever the deceased person would have loved.
Yes.
Right. Like whatever reminds you of their brilliance and just brings you that joy. Like you can do that. Like
You can.
you can totally do that. And I think this is the thing. If you don't know anything about it, you kind of fall into we should do everything what everyone else does.
Yes.
Right? Which happens all the time in our lives. You know, you do the wedding that you think everyone else is doing. You do the birth plan that you think everyone else is doing. You send your kids to the same school because you think everyone else is doing it. But if you have a bit more knowledge and a bit more confidence, then you just go, actually,
what would be a beautiful, like I always look at it as like, what would be the best celebration of their life?
Yeah.
What would be a beautiful honoring of their time on this earth? I often look at it that way. And I think they do it so well. I love that there's all this possibility there to be like, how do we honor?
And you really, really, really can do anything. Like, so I have a PhD student of mine. She's also a celebrant, Stephanie Longmuir, and she's done, you know, thousands of funerals in Melbourne for people. But she did one where there was this couple that had died. They died a few years apart. They're both cremated. When they finally had the ashes together, they hired out a local movie theatre and just did so their funeral had popcorn because they just showed a series of films and invited everyone to come and watch, and they had a little funeral ceremony, and then they just all watched a series of films that the two of them would have loved.
Yes.
I think that's great.
I think that's beautiful.
What else do you need?
Yeah. I just love that the possibilities exist for that honouring in just the unique ways that it can be there.
Yeah. I mean, it can go a little crazy. One of the ones I've heard is people are very passionate about their football.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously. Mm-hmm. So one of the more interesting stories I've heard is of a woman, mad doggies fan.
Yeah.
Western Bulldogs fan. So she wrote, before she died, she arranged that halfway through her funeral, everyone was to watch in full the third quarter from the premiership game of the Western Bulldogs.
That's hilarious.
So can you imagine? Everyone was just sat there, like in the funeral home that had the eulogies. They're like, okay, now we're all just going to sit here and watch the replay.
Somehow that feels very Australian. I don't know how I feel about that.
One day I really want to do a research project about like sports and death.
Yeah.
And like, because it's really interesting, the number of people like becoming perhaps a little bit less religious, but a lot of people get buried with their jersey of their favourite team on their coffin. You see it.
Interesting. I wonder if that's, you know, I so often think sports is about belonging for a lot of people, and that's what they identify with. And that's, and you're right, it's kind of probably moved a lot further away from religion for a lot of people to where is the place that I belong?
Well, it ticks a lot of the boxes of religion. If you're going to the same place every Saturday, sitting in the same seat, singing a songs, you know, believing in a higher power.
Yep.
I mean, that is religion.
It is. I'd love to talk about voluntary assisted dying.
Yeah.
And I mean, firstly, I'd love for you to explain, just for people who don't know what that is, but also I'd love to kind of just chat about, you know, people's thoughts around that, because, you know, I can imagine that brings up very interesting questions for people, or big reactions and feelings.
Big reactions and feelings, even within kind of, I suppose, death study scholars in this kind of area. So voluntary assisted dying is sometimes called medical aid in dying, sometimes called physician-assisted death. We're talking about euthanasia. So we're talking about people who are choosing to end their life, and they're ending their life in a manner that is facilitated by the biomedical system, right? So VAD is legal currently in every state and territory in Australia except for the Northern Territory. There's been some movement to have it introduced in the Northern Territory. Ironically, the Northern Territory was the first in the world to legalise it back in the 90s. Yeah, and then it was...
What happened?
So the federal government at the time then overruled them. So it was legal for about 2 weeks in 1995. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's legal in every state and territory, and where I live in Victoria, it's been practiced for over 10 years. Now, there's a lot of restrictions around it, obviously. So you have to be within kind of 12 months of being expected to die, or 6 months of being expected to lose your capacities through motor neuron disease. And you have to have multiple doctors sign off on it. And you have to, demonstrate that you can give full consent, informed consent. You have to be an adult and all these other kind of requirements to make sure that it's, quite restricted and safe. My position on VAD has always been that I think it is possible to have a system of VAD that respects people's autonomy and respects their kind of control over their body and who they are and their mind, whilst also having a really good system of palliative care. So I think one of the kind of struggles in this area is that VAD is often pitted against having great palliative care.
Yeah.
People worry that if we legalise VAD, we're just going to force people to die, right? That older people are going to feel like they're a burden. People with disabilities are going to feel like they're a burden. People are going to feel like, no one wants to look after me anymore. I'm just going to access it. Or that we're not going to invest in palliative care because we have a system of VAD. And I just don't think that's the case. I think we can do both. What I think it speaks to, though, is an emerging value in our contemporary death culture, which is very much about what we've been talking already, which is about individual expression and people having kind of self-determination over their end, over their dying process, in the same way that they want to have self-determination over their birthing process, right? So for me, kind of this adoption of VAD, particularly by, the baby boomers, by older generations, indicates that people are more willing to think about almost choreographing their end, right? Like, how would I like to die? Where would that like to be? What circumstances? And one of the reasons we know that control is so important is because we have statistics from VAD in Victoria, and we know that, quite interestingly, the majority of people who access those drugs don't end up taking them.
Really?
Most people get the drugs, they have them, and they have them on the nightstand, or they have access to them, and they don't take them.
Wow.
They die of natural causes.
Wow.
But the having of the drugs is really important.
Gosh.
Because it gives control.
Yeah.
And if you're dying of a disease that you cannot control, having the option is always kind of almost a therapeutic in itself.
Yeah.
So I've heard some scholars even discuss VAD not so much as a means for people to access euthanasia, but as a treatment for lack of control.
Wow. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Like, if you feel like everything's been stripped away from you, you've been forced into this corner, all of a sudden you're confronting whatever it is, cancer or lung, having access to those drugs potentially is a way that you are able to have some of that control.
Yeah, gosh, that makes a lot of sense. And what are some of the pushbacks that come up against VAD from people?
It's really difficult. So I suppose one of them is that, for me at least, there's some concern that VAD, it suggests that we're not so comfortable with suffering. Because a lot of people say, you ask a lot of people, what is your image of a good death? They say one is free of suffering, free of pain. But a lot of people's lives are full of suffering, and a lot of people's lives are full of pain. A lot of people's lives, they don't have full control over their body. They do have to rely on other people. And so I'd hate to think that those kind of lives are devalued by people wanting to access VAD. There's a lot of physicians who think that it goes against the Hippocratic Oath to offer VADs. We have conscientious objectors to VAD in the same way that we have conscientious objectors to some forms of obstetrics and gynecological care and abortion and miscarriage care. And then we also have kind of more difficult emerging areas around VAD legislation. So we have one really big emerging and kind of quite thorny ethical issue is the issue of VAD and dementia.
Oh, yes.
Which I cannot work out in my head where I stand on it. So, you might be someone who says, look, I know I'm going to get dementia, and I know at a certain point I may not be able to recognize myself, might not be able to recognize my friends and family. If I ever get to that point, I would like you to end my life through VAD. Right? And there are some states and territories around the world, not in Australia, that have that option currently. We don't have it in Australia. Because the question becomes, down the track, if you ask that person with dementia, would they like to end their life? They might say no, right? And then what then? I find it a really difficult, almost philosophical problem.
Yeah.
Like, is the person that you ask in 10 years' time with the dementia the same person as the person who signed the form 10 years ago?
Yeah.
And there's some evidence to suggest from Canada, at least, where this system does exist in some provinces, that the family might also say, well, we know that this person is no longer dad. That's no longer dad, right? It's a different person entirely. But that person seems pretty happy. They seem pretty content with their life. So maybe we don't actually want them to access VOD.
Yeah.
It's a really thorny issue.
Yes.
No simple answers.
No.
But again, I think it points this idea that because we're not willing to talk about death at all, and because that means we're not willing to advocate for greater investment in palliative care or hospice care or in-home hospice, that we kind of never get to that debate.
Yeah.
Right? And those kind of issues get left off the table. This happens all the time in death care. That the kind of fundamental taboo and the fear around people talking about death do us a disservice over and over and over again.
Yes.
In everything from VAD to cemetery planning to looking after death care workers, OH&S, like in all of these different areas, our discomfort really holds us back.
And I mean, I'm imagining the people that work in those fields don't have the discomfort because they're working in it, but it's everyone else. Is it really everyone else, or is it politicians? Is it just the bigger systemic lens?
Dead people are not great advocates.
No.
And so they don't make a lot of donations to political parties. They don't vote. Yeah, it's really, really hard to make headway in changing this kind of area in Australia. It's been really difficult. It's always seen as a low priority.
Yeah.
You know, ironically, because death is never an emergency and it always is happening to someone else. Like, until you get a politician or you get a political party where people have actually experienced it. And I think that to an extent that is why VOD was legalised in Australia.
Okay.
It's because people went through experiences of quote unquote bad deaths and suffering deaths, and people like Andrew Denton and others really advocated for it. Yes, it was legalised, but that took an extraordinary amount of time, decades of work. And it's interesting you say no death care workers. You know, for them, it's very everyday. I think it is every day for death care workers, but also part of the disservice we do is in not providing them with enough support.
Yes.
You know, funeral directors, morticians, cremation workers, it's a really hard job. And we should care a lot more about these people. So part of the work I did in researching this book was like, you know, I went and worked at a crematorium. I went and cremated people.
Wow.
You know, fun line for the CV. But and you think, okay, these people have seen everything, right? They cannot possibly be freaked out by death. But it was still a very challenging day, any day we had to cremate a child, or any day that the child coming in was the same age as someone's son or daughter, right? Like that. Or when, you know, they were asked to open the coffin. They never really usually open coffins at crematoriums and in Victoria. And all of a sudden they were asked to look upon the dead person. And that was really challenging for them. Like, I worry that because we don't think about death, we don't think about the people who will look after us when we die. And they're often paid really terribly. They're not supported. They're not giving mental health support and counselling. And they're, for that reason, their occupational health and safety, like, the work cover claims are extraordinarily high.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, there's some statistics that suggest that the funeral industry has a higher work cover claim rate than the mining industry does.
Whoa.
And partially it is emotional and psychological distress, but also weirdly it is actually also just manual lifting, labour.
Right. Okay.
Coffins are heavy.
Yes.
Coffins are heavy. Graves have to be dug, and there's a lot of back problems. So this is also a sector that needs a lot more support.
Yes.
And a lot more kind of, I suppose, death literacy and help.
Yes. It reminds me, or it makes me think about often people who are in those roles of deep caring, like nurses and midwives and, doctors or, people who care for the elderly, they're often, the work that they do and sometimes the absolute care and presence and reverence they bring is often not seen.
Yeah.
And there's often just criticism and judgment and people all have their own feelings. And I just remember so beautifully one of my very dearest friends, her son died when he was 17 and he had been unwell for a long time. And the person that came to take care of his body, so we had him on the cooling plates for a while. And so we all got to be with him and it was really beautiful. And then this beautiful woman came to take him and she would text and she would call my friend and talk about his body's doing beautifully and I'm taking care of him. And I remember when she came to pick him up and she was just saying things to my friend, it makes me want to cry.
Yeah.
She's like, I will take such care of his body. And she was like a mama who's like, I am going to love on your son here and take care of his body while we make this transition. And I remember just being like, fuck, this is everything. Because for my friend, it brought such comfort knowing she was handing over her son to someone who was going to be really reverent with him and take care of him and just know that this was the next piece of his journey within it. And I'm like, I would have paid that woman $1 million. She was just so amazing.
And this is the thing. We desperately, desperately want that when the worst thing in the world happens to us, that we can give over the body of our loved ones.
Yeah.
Like this is kind of the scary and extraordinary thing. That when we die, we give over our bodies to other people.
Yes.
Right? It requires this extraordinary act of faith. And I desperately want us to care about those other people.
Yeah.
Right? When I die, and if, that happens kind of soon, I know the person who will cremate me. His name is Shane. He is a beautiful human being. He has 3 daughters. He has a poster on his wall that says, I just want to go out with a smoking hot body. He works at the crematorium, Shane.
I love Shane.
And every single coffin that he sends into the furnace, I've seen him do it, he has this small moment where he puts his hand on the coffin and he tells them to have a good journey.
Wow.
And he does that for every single person that he cremates. And like Shane should be Australian of the Year.
Yes.
Right? Like we're so uncomfortable with death and yet we so desperately want these people to be here to care for us and care for our loved ones.
Yeah.
And I think for everyone who's gone through the kind of experience that you have and your friend does have, you can see the absolute value and gem of those people.
Yeah.
But it is so hard to communicate that to somebody who don't even talk to me about death.
Well, I think what it really touches in me is that in these deeply painful moments, when someone can show up with tenderness and compassion, it can make a really challenging experience quite beautiful.
Yeah.
And I used to think about that a lot in birth as well.
But isn't that grace?
Yes,
That's grace.
It is the people that are often around us in those hardest times that allow us to still navigate what is big and what is tricky.
And it's so funny, like I distinctly remember like the woman who sold me sunflowers when my dad was dying in hospice. And it wasn't even at a flower store that was near the hospital. I was buying these sunflowers and you're kind of always in an altered state of consciousness through those months. Like I think I have no memory of that year really. But I always, it's just like, just trying to be, who are the sunflowers for? Thinking that they must have been for a boyfriend or, I said, they're for my dad. And she said, oh, that's unusual. And she said, yeah, why? He's in hospice. And she just, like, this was just a florist. But she was like the most important person for me in that moment because she just kind of locked eyes for me and just kind of was like, I have been there. I'm here for you right now. I know exactly what it is. And the flowers are not going to heal him, but I know I know where you are in your life, and that's all you need. And it's kind of why I sometimes say that grief is another planet, because it's so difficult to describe that experience unless you've been there.
Yeah.
But on the other side, if you meet somebody, like I jokingly call it the Dead Dad Club, but if I meet someone, I'm like, oh, you're a member of the Dead Dad Club, it's like, I get you.
Yeah.
Right? Because grief is another planet, and you and I have been there.
Yes.
And I know it's really shit. But guess what? I know the way back.
Yeah.
And I'll walk with you. Studying death and dying and writing this book and reflecting on it, sometimes the kind of the problems with Australian death care and the problems with how we think about and talk about and don't think about and talk about death seem totally overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
And so frustrating. And so there's so much misinformation and there's so much fear and but then every so often I meet somebody who you can look in the eye and go, oh, you get it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Grief is another planet, and you and I have been there.
Yes.
And we can make it back.
Yes. Yes. I just think as you're sharing, Hannah, that you know, I think death is one of those portals to our own spirituality, whatever that means for us, in whatever form that comes. And I think we live in a world where we're quite deeply disconnected from that, unless we really actively put time into connecting with it.
Yeah.
And I think I said this to you before, like, you know, I have been around death a bit in my work, and, you know, I've thought about working in death maybe at a different part of my life, because, and what I was always drawn to with it is it just cuts out all the bullshit. It just makes you realize it doesn't matter what color the freaking wallpaper is. And who cares if the delivery is 3 days late? It puts you back in touch with your humanity, but it connects you to something great. Like, it's so
like beautiful. You've seen, I don't know how to describe it except for like the glimmer, like the transcendence, the moment when people kind of realize, oh, who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
It's so funny. I keep saying to people, well, we're all going to die. And I say it to people a lot when they ask me, you know, what coffee order, or I'm sorry that I'm late, or but I say, we're all going to die.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think as much as it's hard and it's difficult, if you have been somebody who's had those experiences through birth or through death or whatever it is, if you've seen people go through those moments, it's not that those moments are addictive, it's just that the other moments just don't seem that important.
I don't.
Like, why would I want to do work that's not about that?
Yeah.
Why would I not want to do work that's not about what makes us human, the most human? And as painful as it is for me to contemplate the people I love dying, my dog dying, like, can't talk about that one. As painful as that is, why would I want to do anything else? Like, we're all going to die.
I get it. Well, I think it's that thing. I hear what you're saying, because it's, I don't know, when we connect into our humanness and we deeply connect with others who are sharing something really big, everything else falls away. And for me, that's the truth of who we are. Like, that's what we're here for. We're here for this deep, to love and to be loved and to navigate these ups and downs, and to maybe just not take ourselves too seriously while we're doing it, right?
Well, the other thing is that death is deeply funny.
It can. I'm glad you said that.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I mean,
It sounds terrible, but it can.
No, well, I sometimes say that death is superlative, by which I mean it's like it's too much of everything.
Yeah.
Right? It's the funniest and the saddest and the scariest and the most of everything that you're going to go through. It is the superlative experience, as with birth. And I mean, there is something just so comical about some of the situations you get yourself into around death. Like, I don't know. I mean, this is a problem. I'm probably going to be cancelled for all of these. But like, I remember when my grandmother died, and my grandfather died decade before her, and they had bought this double plot in the cemetery, but we had all imagined that it was two graves next to each other.
Yeah.
And it turned out it was actually one on top of it. So all I could think about was putting grandma on top of grandpa and him being there like how dare you lie on me for the whole time?
Oh.
I don't know, like, I remember, like, you know, in this conversation about my dad's coffin, and they asked me, you know, what do you want us to dress him in? My dad was a total pragmatist, and he would have thought, well, I'm not bloody there.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea of like putting him in silk pajamas or something just seems so absurd that it was just so desperately funny.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also because, you know, there's a level of like you have to be comfortable with death in order to laugh at it.
Totally. And I think laughter, you know, is just such a beautiful way for us to release stress, but also in these deep, intense moments too, that laughter is just so healing. Yeah. And it's got such a place as well. It can be so that can also unlock the tears. Like there's just, I think we have to give so much space for all of it, don't we?
The best funeral is a funny funeral.
Yes.
Like the best eulogy is when it's always going to be a good eulogy when the best mate stands up.
Yeah,
and it's so close to like the best man speech at a wedding.
Yeah.
It's always like, you're like, oh, here we go. We're going to, you know, we're really going to hear something about him. But that is, I mean, and that's because it's love, right? You know, I think, yes, I mean, there's a lot of gallows, very literally gallows humor in the industry, and a lot of like things that one can never repeat ever again.
Yes.
But I also think that it is that kind of release of stress and energy and absurdity. Like, what an absurd thing that we are conscious beings that know we're going to die. What's going on with that?
I know you can't stretch too much into that because then you're like, whoa, where do we go from there?
Yeah.
To finish off, and I would love to know, like, you know, what a glorious death for you when you think about, I mean, obviously you think about this, like, apart from having Shane there to, you know, high five you as you go, what would be a beautiful death for you?
I've been thinking about this a lot, right? Because people ask me about it. I think one of the weird things is that a lot of death study scholars change their mind a lot.
Really?
Because we're constantly thinking about it. You learn something else, you're like, oh, I'll have a bit of that, you know. So I think that one thing that's really important to me is like my sensory being in the world. And I think that's often really important to people at the end of their life. So for me, like, I'd love to be on this earth for as long as I can eat great food and drink great wine and talk and see and touch and be with my friends and family. And when I can't do that, I can shuffle off this mortal coil. I think I'm done. And if possible, I think because I've studied death, I'm actually quite curious about it. And I'd like to be as conscious as possible for as long as possible, because I'd like to get some answers finally.
I could imagine you and go, oh, that's what it feels like.
I'm going to write the afterword to my book just as I die. Guys, I was wrong. Part 2 comes out. It's a posthumous publication. But then, yeah, I think at this stage I will be cremated if that's probably likely. It's probably what's going to happen. Shane, thank you. And then I think I'm at the current stages, I will be donating my remains to the university to be used in teaching.
Wow.
To hopefully continue my mission of teaching more students about death and dying.
Oh, that's beautiful.
They can all play with my bones.
I love that. I don't know if it feels right for me to go, well, I hope that comes true for you.
I do hope it comes true for me. I mean, I think, you know, you can never get death right.
No.
That's okay.
I think it's like all of life, isn't it? There's just, we think we're in control and we're just not. So you just make.
So absolutely not, aren't we?
We make surrender and just be open to whatever unfolds. This has been just such a glorious, insightful conversation. I'm so grateful for you coming and talking about this really important topic. Like I am on board now with, I mean, I've always
I think I would really think you would be a wonderful end of life.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that'll be my next bit. I'll finish this bit and then I'll do the next one. I'm sure it's coming. What would you like people to know about what you've got going on or your beautiful book? Where can they find it? What would you like to share?
So the book is called How to Die in the 21st Century, and it is out with James and Hudson and is available in all good bookstores. You can also get the audiobook, which I read, which was quite an experience.
It's full on recording an audiobook, isn't it?
Yeah.
I have done one. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. Yep.
And you can also find me on various podcasts and other media, all on my website, which is just hannahgould.com. And at the end of the day, I would like you all to know that you're all going to die. So don't really sweat the small stuff.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Thank you for such a beautiful, rich conversation. I really, I hope that what people take home from this is just leaning a bit more into their stories around it, the grace that is possible with it, and really maybe even just loving on all those people that take care of us, particularly in this stage of our lives.
Love on the carers.
Yeah, love on the carers. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing this time with me. You can find my book, Own Your Story, at bookshops or listen to the audiobook on Audible. I even read it myself. You can stay connected with Humans Being on Instagram, Facebook or YouTube. We love to hear from you, so please leave a comment, question or contemplation. And visit my website, laelstone.com.au, where you'll find lots of great resources and courses for you to explore. This podcast is produced by Nigel Carboon, recorded by the crew at We Make Online Videos, designed by Mike Gall, and our original music is created by Josh Reed. Humans Being is produced on the lands of the Bunurong and Wadawurrung people. We pay respect to their unique and diverse cultures and to elders past, present and future. Until next time, stay connected and don't forget to be human.